When Delilah Carter returns home to save her family's ranch, she never expects a mysterious horse trainer, with secrets as deep as his storm gray eyes, to change everything. But what is Wes Calder really running from? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The morning sun beat down on Crescent Ridge Ranch as Delilah Carter pulled her dusty pickup truck to a stop in front of the main house. She sat for a moment, taking in the sprawling property that had been her family's legacy for 3 generations. The white 2-story ranch house, the red barns, and the miles of wooden fences that contained some of the finest horses in all of Texas. Home. After 2 years away, trying to outrun the gossip and the shame, she was finally back. Delilah stepped out of the truck, her boots hitting the gravel with a familiar crunch. At 34, she was still striking, tall and slim, with honey brown hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and green eyes that missed nothing. She straightened her denim jacket and took a deep breath. "There she is," a booming voice called from the porch. Harlan Carter, her father, stood with his hands on his hips. At 65, he was still a commanding figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver hair and the same green eyes as his daughter. His weathered face broke into a rare smile. "About time you came home, girl," he said, coming down the steps to meet her. Delilah allowed herself to be wrapped in a bear hug. "Hi, Daddy. How was the drive from Austin?" he asked, pulling back to look at her. "Long gave me plenty of time to think about whether this is a good idea or not." Harlan frowned. "Now don't start that again. The breeding program needs you." "I need you." Before Delilah could respond, the sound of hooves thundering across the nearest pasture caught their attention. A magnificent black stallion was running at full speed, mane flying in the wind, with a rider matching his movements perfectly. "Who's that?" Delilah asked, her professional interest immediately piqued by the way horse and rider moved as one. "That's the new guy, Wes Calder. Hired him last month to work with those wild Mustangs we brought in." Delilah watched as Wes slowed the stallion to a trot, then a walk, before dismounting with easy grace. Even from a distance, she could see he was tall and lean, his movements confident but gentle as he patted the horse's neck. "You didn't tell me you were bringing in a horse whisperer," she said. "Didn't know if he'd still be here when you arrived," Harlan replied. "Man's got a reputation for not staying in one place too long, but he's the best I've seen with difficult horses, and those 5 Mustangs need someone special." Delilah nodded, still watching as Wes led the stallion toward one of the barns. There was something about the way he moved, unhurried, purposeful. "Well, let's get you settled in," Harlan said, breaking into her thoughts. "Your old room's waiting." Inside, the house little had changed. The same worn leather furniture, the family photos on the mantel, the smell of coffee always brewing in the kitchen. Delilah paused at a photograph of her mother, gone now for 5 years, sitting astride her favorite, Mare Starlight. "I still miss her every day," Harlan said softly, coming up behind her. "Me too. She'd be glad you're home. Never did understand why you had to run off to Austin after that business with Richard." Delilah stiffened. "Daddy, please. I didn't run off. I needed space after having my engagement fall apart on the front page of every tabloid in Texas. That man never deserved you," Harlan said dismissively. "Now, get unpacked. We've got a meeting with the breeding program investors at 4. After Harlan left, Delilah carried her bags upstairs. Her old room was exactly as she'd left it. The blue quilt her grandmother had made, her riding trophies, her bookshelf full of veterinary textbooks. She'd been the only Carter to go to college, getting her degree in equine medicine before coming back to work at the ranch, until Richard, until the scandal, until she'd needed to escape the whispers and the pity. Delilah changed into fresh jeans and a white button-down shirt, then headed out to the stables. She needed to reconnect with the horses before dealing with investors and her father's plans. The familiar smells of hay and leather greeted her as she walked down the center aisle of the main barn. "Well, hello there, beautiful," she said, stopping at the stall of her mother's mare, now getting on in years. "Did you miss me, Starlight?" The chestnut mare nickered softly and pushed her nose against Delilah's hand. "I missed you too, old girl," she whispered, stroking the white blaze on the horse's face. Mom would be proud of how well you're aging. She talks to you, doesn't she? The deep voice startled Delilah. She turned to find herself face to face with Wes Calder. Up close, he was even more striking, tall, with sun-browned skin, dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck, and eyes the color of a summer storm. He wore a simple white t-shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed boots. "Excuse me?" she asked, trying to regain her composure. "The mare," Wes said, nodding toward Starlight. "I've seen her get anxious when anyone else comes near. But she knows you." "I practically grew up in this stall," Delilah replied. "This was my mother's horse." Wes nodded, a look of understanding crossing his face. "Horses, remember, they're smarter than most people give them credit for." "You must be Wes Calder." "I'm Delilah Carter, I figured," he said with a slight smile. "The boss's daughter, back to save the breeding program." There was no mockery in his tone, just a simple statement of fact. But Delilah felt herself bristle anyway. "I'm back to do my job," she said coolly. "Speaking of which, I'd like to see these Mustangs my father's been talking about." Wes studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Follow me." He led her to the far end of the property where a separate corral had been set up. Inside were 5 horses, wild Mustangs brought in from Bureau of Land Management land. They were beautiful in a rough, untamed way, their coats dusty, but their eyes bright and wary. "That's Ghost," Wes said, pointing to a pale gray stallion who stood apart from the others. "The leader. He's the one we need to win over first." "And how's that going?" Delilah asked, leaning against the fence. "Slowly, as it should." Wes's voice was quiet but firm. "You can't rush trust." Something in the way he said it made Delilah look at him more closely. There was a stillness about him, a patience that was rare. "My father says you're the best," she said. "Your father says a lot of things." Delilah couldn't help but smile at that. "True enough. How long have you been working with horses?" "All my life," Wes replied. "But professionally, about 15 years. Learned from an old Lakota horse trainer in Montana." "And why Crescent Ridge?" "We're a long way from Montana." Wes shrugged. "Your father made me an offer, and I go where the horses need me." Before Delilah could ask more, her father's voice boomed across the yard. "There you are. Meeting starts in 20 minutes, Delilah." "Duty calls," she said to Wes. "I'd like to see more of your work with the Mustangs tomorrow, if that's all right." "They're your horses," he said with a slight nod. "I'm just here to help them adjust." As Delilah walked back toward the main house, she felt Wes's eyes on her. Something about the man intrigued her, his quiet confidence, the gentle way he spoke about the horses. But she hadn't come back to Crescent Ridge for distractions, especially not in the form of a handsome drifter who, by her father's own admission, wouldn't be sticking around. The meeting with the investors went well, with Delilah laying out her plans for a breeding program that would focus on intelligence and temperament as much as speed and conformation. Her veterinary background gave her credibility, and even her father seemed impressed by her presentation. "You've clearly been thinking about this for a while," Harlan said as they walked back to the house after the investors left. "Just because I left doesn't mean I stopped caring about Crescent Ridge," Delilah replied. "This place is in my blood." "Speaking of blood," Harlan said, his tone suddenly serious, "your sister called this morning. She and that husband of hers are coming for a dinner this weekend." Delilah tried not to groan. Her older sister, Patricia, had married the son of their father's biggest competitor. The families had a truce, but tensions were always high when they got together. "Great," she said without enthusiasm. "Can't wait." "Now you be civil," Harlan warned. "We need all the family unity we can get right now. The Miller Ranch is trying to move in on our breeding contacts. Don't worry, I'll play nice. But if Brad Miller starts talking about how his quarter horses are superior to our thoroughbreds—" "Again, I make no promises," Harlan chuckled. "That's my girl." That night, Delilah couldn't sleep. She found herself drawn to the stables, a habit from childhood when worries kept her awake. The barn was quiet, just the occasional soft nicker or the shifting of hooves in straw. She was surprised to see a light on in the tack room. Even more, surprised to find Wes there working on a broken bridle. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked without looking up. "How did you know it was me?" You walk like someone who knows every board in this floor, he said, finally meeting her eyes. Not many people. Too? Delilah leaned against the doorframe. What's your excuse? I don't need much sleep. Never have. He set aside the bridle. Besides, I like the quiet. Gives me time to think. About what? Wes stood up, and Delilah was suddenly aware of how small the tack room was, how close they were standing, about horses, about the wind, about what makes a person leave home and what brings them back. His gaze was direct, and Delilah felt a flutter of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Interest, curiosity, attraction. Sometimes leaving is easier than staying, she said softly, and sometimes coming back is the hardest thing of all, he replied. For a moment they just looked at each other, something unspoken passing between them. Then Delilah straightened up. Well, I should try to get some sleep. Big day tomorrow. Good night, Delilah Carter, Wes said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to touch something deep inside her. Good night, Wes Calder. As she walked back to the house under a sky full of stars, Delilah couldn't shake the feeling that coming home to Crescent Ridge was going to be more complicated than she'd imagined. The breeding program, her father's expectations, her sister's visit, those were challenges she'd been prepared for. But Wes Calder, with his quiet strength and knowing eyes, was something else entirely. Something she hadn't planned for at all. And Delilah Carter always had a plan. The first week of Delilah's return to Crescent Ridge Ranch flew by in a blur of meetings, paperwork, and reacquainting herself with the daily operations. Each morning she woke before dawn, pulled on her work clothes and headed to the stables. And each morning Wes Calder was already there, his quiet presence becoming as familiar as the rhythm of the ranch itself. They developed an unspoken routine. Delilah would check on the breeding horses while Wes worked with the Mustangs. Sometimes they worked side by side in comfortable silence. Other times, they exchanged brief conversations about the horses, the weather, the ranch. Nothing personal. Nothing that crossed the invisible line Delilah had drawn between them. But she watched him. The way he moved around the wild Mustangs, never pushing, never demanding, just being there, letting them come to him in their own time. It was unlike any training method she'd seen before. You're not trying to break them, she observed one morning, leaning on the fence as Wes sat motionless in the center of the corral, Ghost, the pale gray stallion, circling him warily. Nobody wants to be broken, Wes replied without taking his eyes off the Mustang, least of all a creature born to run free. Then what are you doing? Building a relationship. Wes's voice was soft but carried to her clearly. You can force a horse to obey out of fear, but you'll never get its heart that way. Delilah thought about that as she walked back to the main house for yet another meeting with her father. Harlan Carter ruled Crescent Ridge with an iron fist, demanding obedience, expecting perfection. It had worked for decades, building the ranch into one of the most successful breeding operations in Texas. But at what cost? She found her father in his office, poring over financial spreadsheets. There you are, he said, not looking up. We need to talk about this weekend. Patricia and Brad will be here tomorrow, and I want everything to run smooth as silk. I'll be on my best behavior, Delilah promised, sitting across from him. See that you are, and wear something nice for dinner. No jeans and boots, Delilah bit back a retort. At 34, she didn't need her father telling her how to dress, but she nodded anyway. Anything else? Harlan finally looked up, his expression serious. Yes, I need you to keep an eye on that Calder fellow while the Millers are here. What do you mean? Brad's been sniffing around, trying to hire him away, offering more money from what I hear. Delilah felt a surprising stab of panic at the thought of Wes leaving. He wouldn't go to the Millers. Not after what you've told me about their treatment of horses. Money talks, Delilah, and loyalty is hard to come by these days. Is that why you really wanted me back? She asked, a sudden suspicion forming. To keep an eye on your investment. In Wes Calder? Harlan's expression hardened. I wanted you back because you're a Carter, and this ranch is your birthright. And because you're the best damn horse trainer I've ever seen, next to your mother. The mention of her mother softened Delilah's anger. I'm sorry, Daddy. It's just been a lot, coming back here after everything that happened. Harlan's face softened slightly. I know, baby girl. That Richard Jenkins did a number on you, but you're stronger than that. You're a Carter. Later that afternoon, a summer storm rolled in, dark clouds gathering on the horizon and the air heavy with the promise of rain. Delilah was in the barn, checking on a pregnant mare when the first crack of thunder shook the building. The horses immediately grew restless, nickering and shifting in their stalls. "Easy, girl," she soothed the mare, stroking her neck. "It's just a little thunder." The barn door blew open with a gust of wind, and Wes hurried in, soaked to the skin. "Storm came in faster than I expected," he said, pushing his wet hair back from his face. "The Mustangs are spooked." Before Delilah could respond, another boom of thunder, closer this time, sent the horses into a frenzy. The pregnant mare reared up in her stall, nearly knocking Delilah over. "Whoa!" Wes was at her side in an instant, his hand steady on the mare's bridle. "Easy now," he murmured, his voice dropping to a soothing rumble. The mare's eyes rolled, but she settled slightly at his touch. "She's too agitated," Delilah said, her veterinary training kicking in. "This much stress isn't good for the foal." Wes nodded. "What do you need?" "Help me get her to the isolation stall at the end. It's more insulated from the noise." Together, they managed to lead the frightened mare to the quieter stall. Delilah checked her vitals while Wes kept her calm, his hands gentle but firm on her neck. "Her heart rate's too high," Delilah said with concern. "If we can't get her calm." The lights in the barn flickered, then went out completely, plunging them into semi-darkness, broken only by flashes of lightning through the windows. "Perfect," Delilah muttered. To her surprise, Wes began to sing. His voice was low and melodic, a folk song she didn't recognize, with words about mountains and open skies. The mare's ears pricked forward, and gradually her trembling subsided. Delilah stared at him in amazement as he continued to sing, one hand still stroking the mare's neck. The storm raged outside, but in that dark stall, time seemed to stand still. There was only Wes's voice, the calming presence of the horses, and something shifting inside Delilah's carefully guarded heart. When the song ended, the mare was completely calm, nuzzling against Wes's shoulder. "Where did you learn to do that?" Delilah asked softly. "My grandmother," Wes replied. "She said music speaks to the soul in a language beyond words, works on horses and people both." Their eyes met in the dim light, and Delilah felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the humid summer air. "Thank you," she said. "You probably saved this foal's life." Wes shrugged. "Just doing what needed doing." The lights flickered back on, breaking the moment. Delilah stepped back, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "I should check the other horses," she said, her voice not quite steady. Wes nodded. "And I should make sure the Mustangs didn't break." Down the corral in the panic, they went their separate ways, but the memory of his voice in the darkness stayed with Delilah long after the storm had passed. The next day dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had never happened. Delilah spent the morning helping the ranch hands clean up the minor damage. A few fallen branches, some roof shingles torn loose from one of the smaller barns. By afternoon, she was beginning to dread the evening's dinner with her sister and brother-in-law. She was heading back to the house to shower and change when she spotted Wes by the Mustang corral. He was sitting on the ground, his back against a post, apparently asleep. But as she drew closer, she saw that Ghost, the gray stallion, was standing just a few feet away, watching him with cautious interest. Delilah froze, not wanting to spook the Mustang. For weeks, Ghost had kept his distance from Wes, never allowing him to get close. This was progress, slow, patient progress. As she watched, Ghost took a tentative step forward, then another, stretching his neck to sniff at Wes's outstretched hand. Wes remained perfectly still, his eyes half closed, his breathing steady. The moment was so intimate, so fragile, that Delilah felt like an intruder. She began to back away slowly, but her boot crunched on gravel. Ghost's head shot up, his eyes wide with alarm, and in an instant, he was galloping to the far side of the corral. "I'm sorry," Delilah called to Wes. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Wes stood up, brushing dirt from his jeans. "No harm done, he'll come back when he's ready." "How can you be so patient?" she asked. walking over to the fence. Most trainers would have tried to rope him by now. Most trainers are more concerned with deadlines than with the horse's spirit, Wes replied. Besides, the best things in life can't be rushed. The way he looked at her when he said it made Delilah wonder if they were still talking about the horse. Well, I have to go get ready for dinner with my sister and her husband, she said, changing the subject. Should be about as much fun as a root canal. Wes smiled slightly. Family's complicated. That's one way to put it. Patricia married the son of our biggest competitor, and now every family dinner turns into a business negotiation. And you don't like that? Delilah sighed. I love my sister, but she and Brad are always looking for an angle, a way to get ahead. It's exhausting. Will your father expect me to be there? Wes asked, surprising her. At dinner? No, I don't think. So why? Wes shrugged, just wondering if I should make myself scarce. From what I've heard about Brad Miller, he's been trying to lure me over to his ranch for weeks. So her father had been right. And are you tempted? Delilah asked, trying to keep her voice casual. By the Millers? Wes shook his head. I've seen how they treat their horses, like machines, not living beings. Relief flooded through her, stronger than it should have been. Well, if you hear shouting coming from the main house tonight, don't worry. It's just the Carter family, showing their love. Wes laughed, a warm sound that Delilah realized she hadn't heard before. I'll keep that in mind. Dinner was exactly as tense as Delilah had expected. Patricia, 2 years older and always impeccably groomed, arrived in a designer dress that made Delilah's simple blue sundress seem childish by comparison. Brad Miller, with his too bright smile and too firm handshake, immediately began talking about his latest acquisition, a champion quarter horse that had cost more than most people's houses. You should see him run, Brad boasted over the prime. Rib Harlan had ordered from the best steakhouse in town, fastest quarter mile in the state. Speed isn't everything, Delilah said, unable to help herself. Temperament, intelligence, trainability, those matter too. Brad's smile didn't reach his eyes. Spoken like someone who doesn't have a horse that can win, Patricia shot her a warning look. Delilah's just back from Austin, honey. She's still getting reacquainted with the business. I hear you've got that drifter working for you now, Brad said to Harlan, changing subjects abruptly. The horse whisperer. Calder, right? Harlan nodded, his expression giving nothing away. He's good, with difficult cases. I'd pay him double what you're giving him, Brad said casually. Triple even. Man like that could revolutionize our training program. He's not for sale, Delilah said sharply, earning surprised looks from everyone at the table. Everything's for sale, sis, Patricia said with a tight smile. It's just a matter of price. Some people care about more than money, Delilah replied. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. More wine, anyone? Harlan asked, clearly trying to diffuse the tension. After dinner, while Patricia and Harlan discussed business in his study, Delilah found herself cornered by Brad in the living room. You know, your father's getting on in years, he said, swirling his whiskey. Been thinking about retirement from what Patricia tells me. My father will die with his boots on, Delilah replied coldly. He'd never retire. Maybe. But when he does step back, who do you think will take over? You? After that scandal with your ex-fiancé? Brad's smile was predatory. Richard Jenkins did quite a number on the Carter family reputation. Delilah felt her cheeks burn. Richard, the man she'd almost married, had been caught embezzling funds from his family's oil business, and there had been rumors he'd used her connection to the Carter name to make some of his shadier deals. That's ancient history, she said. And Crescent Ridge is stronger than ever. Is it? Because word around town is that your father took out a second mortgage to keep things afloat last year. Those 5 Mustangs he bought? That was his Hail Mary pass. If your new breeding program doesn't work out, is that why you're really here? To gloat over financial problems we don't even have? Brad's smile widened. I'm here because Patricia is my wife and I love her, but I'm a businessman first, and I see opportunity everywhere I look. Before Delilah could respond, the front door opened and to her surprise, Wes walked in. He was still in his work clothes, but he'd put on a clean shirt and his hair was damp, as if he'd just showered. Mr. Carter asked me to drop by, he said, his eyes finding Delilah's across the room. Something about one of the mares acting up again. Brad immediately pasted on his charming smile and strode over to Wes, hand extended. "Brad Miller, I've heard a lot about you, Mr. Calder." Wes shook his hand briefly. "Just Wes is fine." "Well, just Wes. I'd love to talk to you about an opportunity over at Miller Ranch. We've got facilities that would make this place look like a petting zoo." Wes's expression remained neutral. "I'm not looking for a change, but thanks." "You haven't heard my offer yet," Brad persisted. "Let me buy you a drink and we can discuss—" "The mare," Delilah interrupted, coming to stand beside Wes. "Which one is it?" "The bay." "Star Dancer," Wes replied, seeming relieved for the interruption. "She's favoring her left foreleg. Your father thought you should take a look." "I'll come with you," Delilah said quickly. "Sorry, Brad. Duty calls." As they left the house, Delilah felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Thank you," she said once they were out of earshot. "Another minute with Brad, and I might have dumped my wine on his head." Wes's mouth quirked up at the corner. "Would have been interesting to see." "Is there really something wrong with Star Dancer?" "No," Wes admitted. "Your father saw me walking by and practically ordered me to come interrupt. Said something about saving you from that snake oil salesman." Delilah laughed, genuinely surprised. "My father did that?" "He loves you," Wes said simply. "Even if he doesn't always show it the right way." They walked in silence for a moment, the night air cool after the stuffiness of the house. "Brad said something about my father taking out a second mortgage," Delilah said finally. "Do you know anything about that?" Wes hesitated. "It's not my place to talk about your family's finances, but you've heard something," he sighed. "The hands talk. They say Crescent Ridge has been struggling since your mother died. Your father made some risky investments that didn't pan out. The Mustang Project and your breeding program are supposed to turn things around." Delilah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Why hadn't her father told her how bad things were? "No pressure or anything," she muttered. They had reached the main barn, now quiet as the horses settled for the night. On impulse, Delilah climbed up to sit on the split-rail fence, something she'd done countless times as a girl. After a moment's hesitation, Wes joined her. "You'll make it work," he said. "I've seen you with the horses. You have a gift. Like you do. Different. I have patience. You have vision. Between the two of us—" He trailed off as if suddenly aware of what he was implying. "Between the two of us, what?" Delilah asked softly. Wes looked at her, his grey eyes silver in the moonlight. "We could do something special here." The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with possibility. Delilah was acutely aware of his shoulder nearly touching hers, of the clean scent of soap on his skin. "Why did you really come to Crescent Ridge, Wes?" she asked. "The truth." Before he could answer, a shout came from the direction of the house, Harlan's voice, calling Delilah's name. The moment was broken. Wes jumped down from the fence and offered a hand to help her. When their fingers touched, Delilah felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with the previous night's storm. "Better go see what he wants," Wes said, releasing her hand. Delilah nodded, already missing his warmth. "This conversation isn't over," she said. Wes's smile was a mixture of promise and warning. "Some answers take time, Delilah Carter. Just like winning over a wild horse." As she walked back to the house, Delilah knew that something had shifted between them, a boundary crossed, a possibility acknowledged, and for the first time since coming home to Crescent Ridge, she felt truly awake, truly alive. Whatever Wes Calder was hiding, whatever had brought him to her family's ranch, she was determined to discover it, even if it meant risking her newly mended heart in the process. The morning after the disastrous dinner with the Millers, Delilah found her father in the kitchen, nursing a cup of black coffee. His face looked more lined than usual, his shoulders slightly stooped. For the first time she saw him as he truly was, a man getting older carrying the weight of a legacy. "Why didn't you tell me how bad things really are?" she asked without preamble, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Harlan didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Because it's my job to worry about the finances, not yours." "It's my ranch too, Daddy. Or it will be someday. I deserve to know the truth." Harlan sighed, setting down his cup. After your mother died, I made some mistakes. Tried to expand too fast, bought stock that didn't perform. The drought 2 years ago didn't help. Feed prices went through the roof. He looked up at her, his green eyes, so like her own, clouded with worry. I'm not broke, Delilah, but we're walking a tight line. And the Mustangs, how do they fit into this? Bureau of Land Management was practically giving them away. Wild horses have a certain appeal. People will pay top dollar for a well-trained Mustang with that untamed spirit still in its eyes. If Wes can work his magic on those 5, especially that gray stallion, we could turn a tidy profit. Enough to keep us afloat until your breeding program starts showing results. Delilah nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. Is that why? You hired Wes because you couldn't afford anyone else? A flash of the old Harlan Carter pride showed in her father's face. I hired him because he's the best, and because he was willing to work for less than his usual fee, so long as I gave him free rein with the horses. Why would he do that? Delilah wondered aloud. Brad Miller was ready to pay him triple what you're offering. You'd have to ask him that, Harlan replied, standing up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got a ranch to run. Patricia and that husband of hers are leaving after breakfast, thank God. As her father left, Delilah sat at the kitchen table deep in thought. Wes Calder was becoming more of a mystery, not less. A man with his reputation could work anywhere, command any price. Why choose Crescent Ridge, especially when it was struggling? She found Wes at the Mustang Corral, as she'd known she would. He was inside now, sitting cross-legged on the ground, seemingly doing nothing. Ghost, the gray stallion, was keeping his distance, but watching intently. Any progress? Delilah asked, coming to stand at the fence. Some, Wes replied without turning around. He's curious. That's a start. Can I come in, or will that spook him? Come in slowly. Stay by the fence. Let him see you're not a threat. Delilah carefully opened the gate and slipped inside, closing it softly behind her. She leaned against the fence, making herself as non-threatening as possible. Ghost's ears flicked toward her, but he didn't run. My father told me why he really bought these Mustangs, she said quietly. We need the money they could bring. Wes nodded. I figured as much. Did he tell you that when he hired you? He didn't. Have to. I've worked enough ranches to know the signs of financial trouble. Delilah watched as Ghost took a few steps closer to Wes, then stopped, nostrils flaring. So why did you agree to work for less than your usual fee? Wes was silent for a long moment, his focus still on the Mustang. Because these horses deserve a chance, he finally said, and because Crescent Ridge has a reputation for treating its animals right. That matters to me. It was the truth, Delilah sensed, but not the whole truth. There's more to it than that. Wes finally turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious. There usually is. Before she could press him further, Ghost suddenly approached Wes, his movements hesitant but deliberate. Everyone froze as the Mustang stretched out his neck, sniffing Wes's outstretched hand. Then, in a moment that took Delilah's breath away, the stallion allowed Wes to touch his muzzle, just a brief contact before backing away, but a monumental breakthrough nonetheless. Did you see that? Delilah whispered, not wanting to break the spell. Wes's face showed a quiet satisfaction. It's a start, he said again, but there was a warmth in his voice that hadn't been there before. They stayed in the corral for another hour, Wes occasionally speaking softly to Ghost, the stallion gradually becoming more comfortable with his presence. Delilah watched, mesmerized by the gentle dance between man and horse. There was something deeply moving about the way Wes dealt with the Mustang, patient, respectful, waiting for trust to be given, rather than forcing it. Later, as they walked back to the main barn together, Delilah found herself telling Wes about her mother. She's the one who taught me to love horses, she said. She had a way with them like you do. My father was always about the business side, bloodlines, racing times, market value, but Mom saw each horse as an individual with its own personality and spirit. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. Delilah smiled at the memory. When I was 10, I fell off a young gelding we were training. Broke my arm in 2 places. My father wanted to sell the horse, said he was too unpredictable, but Mom wouldn't hear of it. She worked with him every day until he was as gentle as a lamb. She never gave up on anything or anyone she believed in. That's where you get it from then, Wes said. Get what? That fire in your eyes, that stubbornness. He smiled slightly. That unwillingness to let go. There was something intimate in the way he said it, as if he'd been watching her closely all this time. Delilah felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the summer heat. My mother left me something in her will, she said, suddenly wanting to share this with him. A piece of land on the far side of the ranch, the wild meadow by the creek. It was her favorite spot, but I've never known what to do with it. My father wants to develop it, add more pastures, but it wouldn't be the same, Wes finished for her. Exactly. Delilah looked at him in surprise. How did you know that's what I was going to say? Because I've seen you walk the fence, line at sunset. You're not just checking for loose posts. You're connecting with the land, same way you connect with the horses. It's in your blood. The fact that he had noticed such a private habit, that he understood what it meant to her, made Delilah feel seen in a way she hadn't in years. Not since before Richard, her ex-fiancé, had betrayed her trust and left her humiliated in front of all of Texas high society. You were going to tell me why you really came to Crescent Ridge, she reminded him, trying to steer the conversation away from herself. Last night, before my father interrupted. Wes's expression grew more guarded. Another time, maybe. You can't keep deflecting forever, Wes called her. Not forever, he agreed, just until I'm sure. Sure of what? That you're ready to hear it. There was something in his tone that sent a shiver down Delilah's spine. Not fear, exactly, but a premonition that whatever Wes was hiding could change everything between them. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of one of the ranch hands, a young man named Thomas. Miss Carter, your father's looking for you, he said. Something about the Miller contract. Delilah sighed. I'll be right there. She turned back to Wes. We're not done with this conversation. He nodded, his expression unreadable. I know. For the next few days, Delilah was too busy to pursue the mystery of Wes Calder. The ranch was short-staffed with 2 hands out sick, and she found herself pitching in with everyday chores she hadn't done since she was a teenager. Mucking stalls, hauling hay, fixing fence posts in the hot Texas sun. To her surprise, she loved it. There was something deeply satisfying about physical labor, about falling into bed each night exhausted but content. It reconnected her to the ranch in a way that paperwork and breeding charts never could. Wes worked alongside her often, his quiet, strength a steady presence. They developed a rhythm together, anticipating each other's movements, needing few words to communicate. Sometimes their hands would brush as they passed tools back and forth, or their shoulders would touch as they worked side by side. Each contact, however brief, sent a jolt through Delilah that was becoming harder and harder to ignore. One evening, after a particularly long day, Delilah found herself alone in the stables. The other hands had gone home, and her father was in town at a meeting with the bank. She was brushing down Starlight, her mother's old mare, when she heard a truck pull up outside. Hello? She called, reaching for the pitchfork leaning against the wall, just in case. It's just me, Wes's voice called back, and Delilah felt herself relax. He appeared in the doorway, holding a large paper bag. Thought you might be hungry. I picked up some burgers from that diner in town. The gesture was so unexpected, so thoughtful, that Delilah found herself momentarily speechless. Thank you, she finally managed. I'm starving, actually. They sat on bales of hay in the center aisle of the stable, eating burgers and sharing a bag of fries. It was the most informal meal Delilah had had in years, and somehow it felt more special than any fancy restaurant dinner. Did you always want to work with horses? She asked, wiping ketchup from her fingers. Wes nodded. Ever since I can remember. My grandfather had a small ranch in Montana. Nothing fancy, just a working cattle operation. But he had this old paint, horse named Chief, that everyone said was unrideable, except I rode him when I was 7. 7? Delilah raised her eyebrows. How? I didn't know he was supposed to be dangerous, Wes said with a slight smile. No one told me. I just walked up to him one day, climbed on, and he let me. That's when I realized that most of the time, it's our expectations that create problems, not the horses themselves. And your parents, were they ranchers too? A shadow crossed Wes's face. My father worked the oil fields, wasn't around much. My mother tried to hold things together, but it was hard. When I was 15, my grandfather died and we lost the ranch. That's when I started drifting, working anywhere that had horses. It was the most he'd shared about his past, and Delilah sensed there was still much he wasn't saying. "And your brother?" she asked gently. "I heard you had a brother in Montana." Wes went very still. "Who told you that?" "One of the hands mentioned it. Said there was some kind of land dispute up there." Wes crumpled up his burger wrapper, his appetite apparently gone. "My brother died 3 years ago. The land dispute is complicated." "I'm sorry," Delilah said, instinctively reaching out to touch his arm. "I didn't mean to pry." "Yes, you did," Wes said, but there was no anger in his voice. "It's okay. You have a right to be curious. But it's not a story for tonight." The way he looked at her, a mixture of wariness and longing, made Delilah's heart beat faster. She was suddenly very aware of how close they were sitting, how intimate the stable felt with just the two of them, and the soft sounds of horses settling for the night. "Why do you keep your distance from everyone?" she asked, not pulling her hand away from his arm. "It's not just me. You live in that trailer at the edge of the property, eat most meals alone, barely talk to the other hands. It's simpler that way," Wes replied, his voice low. "Less chance of complications." "And is that what I am? A complication?" His eyes met hers, grey and deep as a stormy sky. "The most beautiful complication I've ever known." The words hung between them, charged with possibility. Delilah felt herself leaning toward him, drawn by a force she couldn't resist. Wes remained perfectly still, watching her, waiting, just as he did with the wild horses, letting her come to him in her own time. When their lips finally met, it was soft, tentative, a question more than a demand. But when Wes's hand came up to cup her face, his touch gentle but sure, the kiss deepened, becoming something neither of them could deny or resist. Delilah had kissed men before, had nearly married one, but nothing had prepared her for this. This wasn't calculated or showy like Richard's kisses had been. This was real, raw, a connection that went beyond the physical. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Wes rested his forehead against hers. "I didn't come here for this," he said softly. "I need you to know that." "Then why did you come?" Delilah asked, her heart pounding. Before he could answer, the sound of a truck pulling up outside made them both freeze. Harlan's voice called out, "Delilah, you still in there, girl?" They moved apart just as Harlan walked in, his face tired from his meeting in town. He looked from Delilah to Wes, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Everything all right here?" he asked. "Fine." "Daddy," Delilah said, hoping her face wasn't as flushed as it felt. "Wes brought dinner. We were just finishing up." "Well, I need to talk to you. Alone," Harlan added, glancing at Wes. "Bank business." Wes stood up, gathering the remains of their meal. "I'll head out then. Good night, Mr. Carter." "Delilah." The way he said her name, soft, almost reverent, sent a shiver through her that she prayed her father didn't notice. Once Wes was gone, Harlan sat heavily on the hay bale, looking older than his years. "The bank's called in part of our loan. We need to come up with $50,000 by the end of the month, or they'll start foreclosure proceedings." Delilah stared at him in shock. "What? Why? I thought we had until the end of the year." "Interest rates went up, and that bastard Miller has been whispering in the bank president's ear, talking about how Crescent Ridge is a bad investment." Harlan ran a hand over his face. "We're going to have to sell some stock. Maybe that 2-year-old colt we were saving for next year's derby." "No," Delilah said firmly. "Thunder's Promise could be our next champion. If we sell him now, we'll never." "No? Then what do you suggest? We need cash and we need it fast." Delilah thought quickly. "What about my mother's land, the meadow by the creek? You've always said developers would pay top dollar for it." Harlan looked at her in surprise. "You've fought me tooth and nail every time I've suggested selling that land. It was your mother's special place, and she'd want it to save the ranch," Delilah said, though the words pained her. "We can at least see what offers we can get." Harlan reached over and squeezed her hand. "I'll make some calls tomorrow, but are you sure, baby girl? That land means a lot to you." "The whole ranch means a lot to me, Daddy. We'll do what we have to do." That night, Delilah couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the kiss with Wes, about the land she might have to sell, about the precarious state of the ranch's finances. Around midnight, she gave up trying to rest and slipped out of the house, heading for the meadow by the creek. It was a clear night, the Texas sky ablaze with stars. The meadow, a natural clearing surrounded by oak trees, was bathed in silvery moonlight. Delilah walked to the center of it, where a single ancient oak stood sentinel. Her mother had loved this spot, had often brought Delilah here for picnics, or just to sit and talk. "What would you do, Mom?" she whispered to the night air. "How do I save what matters without losing what's precious?" "By remembering what's truly irreplaceable," a voice said from behind her. Delilah spun around to find Wes standing at the edge of the meadow. "How did you know I'd be here?" she asked. "I saw you walking from my trailer," he replied, coming closer. "Couldn't sleep either," she shook her head. "The bank is calling in part of our loan. We need $50,000 by the end of the month, or we could lose everything." Wes's face showed genuine concern. "I'm sorry, Delilah. Is there anything I can do?" "Train those Mustangs faster?" She attempted a smile, but it didn't reach. Her eyes. "We might have to sell this land. It's the only asset we can liquidate quickly enough." "This place?" Wes looked around the moonlit meadow. "But it's special to you." "It's just land," Delilah said, trying to convince herself as much as him. "The ranch is what matters. My father's legacy. My mother would understand." Wes was quiet for a moment, then said, "There might be another way." "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for something difficult. "The reason I came to Crescent Ridge, it wasn't just for the horses. I came because of your mother." Delilah felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "My mother? But she died 5 years ago. How could you—" "I never met her," Wes said, quickly. "But I knew of her. My brother Jake did business with her once. She bought a horse from him, a black stallion named Midnight Star." "I remember," Delilah said slowly. "That was about 6 years ago. Mom fell in love with that horse the moment she saw him. What you probably don't know is that my brother was in financial trouble at the time. Your mother paid twice what the horse was worth because she knew Jake needed the money." Wes's voice was tight with emotion. "She saved our family ranch, at least for a while." "I don't understand," Delilah said. "What does this have to do with now?" Wes reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Before Jake died, he asked me to find the Carter family and give them this. It's the deed to a piece of land in Montana, land that's been in our family for generations, land that, as of last month, has oil on it." Delilah stared at him, stunned. "Oil? But why would your brother leave land with oil on it to our family?" "Because," he found out, "the black stallion died shortly after your mother did. He felt guilty, like he'd sold her a defective horse even though the vet said it was just one of those things that happens. Jake was stubborn that way." Wes's smile was sad. "When the oil was discovered, he said it was a sign that the Carters should have it to repay your mother's kindness, and that's why you came here to give us this deed." Wes nodded. "I've been trying to find the right time to understand if your family was the kind that would use the land responsibly. Jake wanted me to be sure before I handed it over. And are you? Sure, I mean." "I am now," Wes said, holding out the deed to her. "This land is worth far more than $50,000, Delilah. It could save Crescent Ridge and then some." Delilah looked at the paper in his hand, then back at his face. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Would you have believed me? A drifter showing up with a story about a dead brother and valuable land?" Wes shook his head. "I needed you to know me. First, to trust me. And the kiss," Delilah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Was that part of your plan too?" Wes stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him in the cool night air. "The kiss was the most honest thing I've done in years," he said. "I came here with one purpose, Delilah Carter, but I'm staying for an entirely different reason." The way he looked at her in that moment, like she was something precious, something worth fighting for, made Delilah's breath catch. She wanted to believe him, wanted it more than she'd wanted anything in a long time, but the ghost of Richard's betrayal still haunted her. "How do I know this is real?" she asked. The deed, the story about your brother, your feelings for me. How do I know it's not just another lie from another man passing through my life? You don't, Wes said simply. That's what trust is, Delilah. Taking a chance on something, on someone, even when you're afraid. He was right, and she knew it. Trust wasn't about certainty. It was about faith in the face of doubt. It was about looking into someone's eyes and choosing to believe the truth you saw there. Delilah took the deed from his hand. I'll need to show this to my father, have our lawyer look it over. Of course. And if it's real, if it's worth what you say it is, what happens then? Do you just ride off into the sunset, mission accomplished? Wes took her free hand in his. I told you. I came here for one reason, but now I have a reason to stay, if you want me to. The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Delilah looked at their joined hands, then up at the starlit sky that had witnessed so much of her life, her joys, her sorrows, her hopes and disappointments. She thought of her mother, who had always believed in taking chances on people, who had seen the good in everyone. And she thought of the wild Mustang ghost, who was slowly learning to trust again. I think, she said slowly, that sometimes the most valuable things are the ones we have to take a risk for. And as Wes pulled her into his arms, the deed to the Montana land pressed between them like a promise, Delilah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Hope for the ranch, hope for her future, and most of all, hope that this time her heart had chosen wisely. But even as she melted into Wes's kiss, a small voice at the back of her mind whispered a warning. Trust was a beautiful thing, but it was also dangerous. And there was still so much about Wes Calder that remained a mystery. The morning sun was just breaking over the horizon when Delilah knocked on the door of her father's study. She hadn't slept all night, her mind racing with thoughts of Wes, the deed to the Montana land, and what it could all mean for Crescent Ridge. "Come in," Harlan called, his voice gruff with early morning fatigue. Delilah found him at his desk, coffee in hand, already reviewing the ranch's accounts. The lines on his face seemed deeper than ever, the weight of financial worry evident in the slump of his shoulders. "Daddy, I need to talk to you about something important," she said, sitting across from him. She placed the folded deed on the desk between them. "What's this?" Harlan asked, picking it up. "Wes gave it to me last night. It's a deed to land in Montana, land that apparently has oil on it, land that his brother wanted our family to have." Harlan's eyebrows shot up as he unfolded the paper. "What kind of game is Calder playing?" "It's not a game," Delilah said firmly. "His brother, Jake, sold Mom that black stallion, Midnight Star, remember? Apparently, Mom paid far more than the horse was worth because Jake was in financial trouble. It was her way of helping him, without making him feel like a charity case." "That sounds like your mother," Harlan said softly, his expression softening. "She was always trying to help people, even strangers. When Jake found out the horse died not long after Mom, he felt guilty. Then oil was discovered on his family's land. Before he died, he asked Wes to make sure the Carter family got the land, as a way of repaying Mom's kindness." Harlan studied the deed carefully. "And Wes just happened to show up right when we're in financial trouble? That's quite a coincidence, Delilah." "I know how it sounds," she admitted. "But I believe him, Daddy. And we can have our lawyer check it out. If it's real, if the land is worth what Wes says it is, Crescent Ridge could be saved." Harlan leaned back in his chair, his eyes sharp. "And what does Calder want in return?" "No, one gives away valuable land for nothing." "He doesn't want anything," Delilah said. "He came here to fulfill a promise to his brother. That's all." "That's all?" Harlan's gaze was penetrating. "Are you sure about that, baby girl? Because I've seen the way he looks at you, and the way you look at him." Delilah felt her cheeks flush, but she didn't look away. "Whatever is between Wes and me is separate from this," she said, tapping the deed. "He gave it freely, with no conditions." Harlan sighed. "I'll call Jackson first thing, have him look into it." Jackson Davis was the family lawyer, a man who had handled the Carters' legal affairs for over 20 years. "But Delilah, be careful. I don't want to see you hurt again. Richard Jenkins nearly broke you." "I'm not the same person I was 2 years ago, Daddy," Delilah said, standing up. "I'm stronger now, and Wes isn't Richard. He's not after our money, or our name. He's just different. Different can be good, Harlan conceded, but different can also be dangerous. Just promise me you'll take things slow, at least until we know if this deed is legitimate. I promise. She leaned over and kissed her father's cheek. Thank you for trusting me on this. I don't trust Calder, Harlan grumbled, but I do trust you. Later that morning, Delilah found Wes in the main barn, preparing to work with the Mustangs. The events of the previous night hung between them. The kiss, the revelation about the land, the tentative beginning of something neither of them had been looking for. I gave the deed to my father, she said without preamble. He's having our lawyer check it out. Wes nodded, his expression serious. Good. I want you to be sure it's legitimate. Are you worried it isn't? No, but I understand why your father would be suspicious. It's a lot to take in. Delilah stepped closer to him, lowering her voice even though they were alone in the barn. If it's real, if it saves Crescent Ridge, what happens next? With us, I mean. Wes's gray eyes met hers. That depends on you. I've been moving from place to place for so long I've almost forgotten what it feels like to want to stay somewhere. But I want to stay here, Delilah. With you. The simple honesty of his words touched her deeply. Even after the Mustangs are trained? Even after you've fulfilled your promise to your brother? Even then, he said, if you'll have me. Delilah was about to reply when Patricia's voice rang out from the barn doorway. Well, isn't this cozy? Delilah turned to see her sister standing there, looking out of place in designer jeans and an expensive blouse. Patricia? What are you doing back here? I thought you and Brad went home yesterday. We did, Patricia said, walking into the barn. But then the strangest rumor reached us this morning. Something about a mysterious deed to oil-rich land in Montana. Her eyes flicked to Wes. And about our new horse trainer being at the center of it all. Wes's face remained impassive. News travels fast. It's a small town, Patricia replied. People talk, especially when it involves the Carter family and a fortune in oil rights. She turned back to Delilah. Daddy called Jackson, I take it. Of course, Delilah said. We're having everything verified. Smart. Although I have to wonder why Mr. Calder here would choose to give away such valuable land. Unless, of course, there's something wrong with it, or with the deed itself. There's nothing wrong with either, Wes said, his voice calm but firm. My brother wanted your family to have it. I'm just honoring his wishes. Patricia raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. How noble. And I suppose the fact that you've been getting rather close to my little sister has nothing to do with it. That's enough, Patricia, Delilah said sharply. Wes has been nothing but honest with us, unlike some people I could mention. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know Brad's been pressuring the bank to call in our loan. He wants Crescent Ridge to fail so Miller Ranch can swoop in and buy it cheap. Patricia had the grace to look uncomfortable. Brad is a businessman. He sees opportunities where others see problems. He sees a chance to destroy our family legacy. Delilah countered. And you're helping him. I'm looking out for my future, Delilah, Patricia snapped. Something you might want to consider before you fall for a drifter, with a convenient story about valuable land. Before Delilah could respond, her father appeared in the barn doorway. That's enough, both of you, he said firmly. Patricia, I need to speak with you. Now. As Patricia followed Harlan out, she shot Wes one last suspicious look. When they were gone, Delilah turned to him with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry about that. Patricia has always been difficult. She's worried about you, Wes said, surprising her. In her own way, she cares. You're very forgiving, Delilah noted. Life's too short to hold grudges. His eyes clouded with an old pain. I learned that the hard way with Jake. What happened with your brother? Delilah asked gently. You still haven't really told me. Wes was quiet for a moment, then said, We had a falling out. Over the land, ironically enough. I wanted to sell it years ago, use the money to modernize the ranch. Jake refused, said it was our heritage that we'd find a way to make it work without selling out. We fought. I left. 3 months later, he was gone, thrown from a horse during a thunderstorm. His voice cracked slightly. I never got to say goodbye, never got to tell him he was right all along. Delilah reached for his hand, squeezing it. tight. That's why the deed is so important to you. It's not just about saving Crescent Ridge, it's about honoring your brother. It's about making things right, Wes agreed. Jake believed in legacy, in family, in keeping promises. He would have wanted this. Then we'll make sure it happens, Delilah said. Together. The days that followed were tense with waiting. Jackson Davis, the family lawyer, confirmed that the deed appeared genuine, but said it would take time to verify the oil rights and the land's value. Harlan grew increasingly impatient, the bank's deadline looming closer each day. Meanwhile, Delilah and Wes continued to work with the Mustangs. Ghost, the gray stallion, was making remarkable progress. He now allowed Wes to touch him freely and had even accepted a halter. The other 4 Mustangs, taking their cue from their leader, were also becoming more trusting. One evening, as the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold, Wes took Delilah's hand and led her to the Mustang corral. "I want to show you something," he said, a hint of excitement in his voice. Inside the corral, Ghost stood calm and alert. Wes approached him slowly, speaking in that low, soothing voice that seemed to work magic on all horses. To Delilah's amazement, the stallion allowed Wes to place a lightweight saddle on his back. "He's ready," Wes said, turning to her with quiet pride. "But I think you should be the first to ride him." Delilah's eyes widened. "Me? But you're the one who's earned his trust." "I've been preparing him for you all along," Wes replied. "He's a Carter horse now. He needs to know his real family." Touched beyond words, Delilah approached Ghost carefully. The stallion watched her with intelligent eyes, no longer wary but curious. With Wes's help, she mounted, settling into the saddle. With the ease of someone who had been riding all her life. Ghost tensed for a moment, then relaxed, accepting her weight. Slowly, Delilah guided him around the corral, feeling the powerful muscles beneath her, the wild spirit now willingly joining with her own. It was one of the most profound moments of her life as a horsewoman. "He's magnificent," she breathed as she finally brought Ghost to a stop beside Wes. "So are you," Wes said softly, helping her dismount. His hands lingered at her waist, and then he was kissing her, right there in the golden light of sunset, with Ghost watching curiously beside them. It was a perfect moment, one that Delilah wished could last forever. But as they walked back to the main house, hand in hand, they saw Jackson Davis's car in the driveway. "The lawyer's here," Delilah said, feeling a flutter of anxiety. "This is it." They found Harlan, Patricia, and Jackson in the living room. The lawyer had papers spread out on the coffee table, and all 3 looked up when Delilah and Wes entered. "Well?" Delilah asked, her heart pounding. Jackson's expression was grave. "The deed is genuine, as are the oil rights. The land is indeed valuable, worth considerably more than $50,000. Delilah felt a surge of relief. "That's wonderful news." "Not exactly," Jackson continued. "There's a complication. The mineral rights and surface rights to the land were separated years ago. The deed Mr. Calder provided gives you the surface rights, but the mineral rights, including the oil, belong to Blackridge Energy Corporation." Wes looked genuinely shocked. "That's not possible. The land has been in my family for generations. The rights were never separated." "According to the county records in Montana, they were," Jackson said, showing them a document. "In 1997, your father, James Calder, sold the mineral rights to Blackridge for a one-time payment of $75,000. "My father never told us," Wes said, his voice hollow with disbelief. "All these years, Jake thought we owned it all." Harlan's face was thunderous. "So the land is worthless to us?" "Not worthless," Jackson corrected, "but worth far less than you were hoping. Maybe enough to buy you a little more time with the bank, but not enough to solve your financial problems completely." Delilah looked at Wes, searching his face for any sign of deception, but all she saw was genuine shock and devastation. "You didn't know," she said softly. "I swear to you, Delilah, I had no idea," Wes replied, his gray eyes troubled. "Jake never mentioned this. He must not have known either." Patricia, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. "Well, isn't this convenient? The White Knight rides in with a solution that turns out to be worthless, but he's already wormed his way into Delilah's heart. I wonder what the real game is here." "There is no game," Wes said firmly. I came here to honor my brother's wishes. If I'd known about the mineral rights, I would have told you immediately. Harlan stood up, his expression hard. Intentions aside, the fact remains that we're no better off than we were before. Worse, in fact, because we've wasted valuable time chasing this dead end. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter, Wes said. I never meant to give you false hope. Well, you did, Harlan snapped, and now we have less than 2 weeks to come up with the money, or the bank starts foreclosure. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Then Patricia spoke again, her voice surprisingly gentle. There might be another way, Daddy. All eyes turned to her. Brad and I have been talking, she continued. We could buy out your stake in Crescent Ridge, give you enough to pay off the bank and have a comfortable retirement. The ranch would stay in the family, just the Miller-Carter family, instead of just the Carters. Absolutely not, Delilah said, immediately. You and Brad would change everything, turn it into a factory operation like Miller Ranch. We'd modernize, yes, Patricia admitted, but the Carter name would still be part of it. It's the best solution, Delilah. Be practical. Harlan looked torn, the weight of decades of responsibility evident in his tired eyes. I need to think about this, he said finally. Everyone out. I need some quiet. As they filed out of the living room, Patricia grabbed Delilah's arm. This is the only way, little sister. Unless you happen to have $50,000 hidden under your mattress. There has to be another solution, Delilah insisted. Such as, Patricia challenged, your boyfriend's magic deed didn't work out. The bank isn't going to extend the deadline again. What's left? Without waiting for an answer, Patricia walked away, leaving Delilah and Wes alone in the hallway. So sorry, Wes said, his voice heavy with regret. I truly believed the land would save Crescent Ridge. I know you did, Delilah replied. This isn't your fault, Wes. You couldn't have known what your father did. Still, I feel responsible. He ran a hand through his hair, his expression troubled. But Patricia's right about one thing. We need another solution, and fast. Delilah's mind raced, trying to think of options they hadn't considered. Suddenly, an idea formed. The Mustangs, she said. They're worth something, especially Ghost now that he's accepting riders. Wes shook his head. Not enough. Even fully trained, the 5 of them wouldn't bring in $50,000. Maybe not from ordinary buyers, Delilah conceded. But what about a special buyer? Someone who appreciates exceptional horses. Like who? Elizabeth Thornton, Delilah said, excitement growing in her voice. She's a wealthy widow who collects rare and special horses. She tried to buy Starlight from my mother years ago, offered an obscene amount of money. Mom turned her down, of course, but they stayed friends. Mrs. Thornton visits her ranch in Austin a few times a year. Wes considered this. It's worth a try, but will your father be willing to sell the Mustangs? They were supposed to be the foundation of your new breeding program. We can start over if we have to, Delilah said, but we can't do anything if we lose the ranch. The next morning, Delilah called Elizabeth Thornton, explaining the situation and inviting her to come see the Mustangs. To her relief, Mrs. Thornton agreed to visit the following day. When Delilah told her father about the plan, Harlan was skeptical but willing to try anything at this point. These horses better be as special as you say, he grumbled. They are, Delilah assured him. Wes has done amazing work with them, especially Ghost. You'll see. Harlan gave her a searching look. You really care about him, don't you? Calder, I mean. I do, Delilah admitted. He's a good man, Daddy. Honest, kind, with a gift for horses that even Mom would have admired. The deed wasn't his fault, Harlan acknowledged grudgingly. I can see that, but Delilah, he's still a drifter, a man with no roots, no real home. Even if he stays now, how long before the open road calls to him again? It was a fear Delilah had been trying to ignore, that Wes, for all his talk of wanting to stay, would eventually move on as he always had. But she pushed the thought aside. One problem at a time, she said. Let's focus on saving the ranch first. Elizabeth Thornton arrived the next day in a sleek black SUV driven by a uniformed chauffeur. Despite being in her 70s, she was an elegant, sharp-eyed woman who clearly knew horses. She greeted Delilah warmly, having known her since childhood. Your mother would be proud of you taking charge like this, she said as they walked toward the Mustang corral. "Margaret always said you had the best eye for horses in the family." "I learned from the best," Delilah replied with a sad smile. "I still miss her every day." "As do I," Mrs. Thornton said. "She was one of the few true friends I've had in this business. Now show me these remarkable Mustangs of yours." Wes was waiting at the corral, the 5 Mustangs groomed and looking their best. Ghost, in particular, seemed to shine in the morning sunlight, his pale grey coat almost silvery. Delilah made the introductions, and Mrs. Thornton assessed Wes with the same critical eye she used for horses. "I've heard of you," she said. "They say you have a way with difficult cases." "I just have patience, ma'am," Wes replied respectfully, "a rare quality these days." Mrs. Thornton turned her attention to the Mustangs. "Tell me about them." For the next hour, Wes and Delilah demonstrated what the Mustangs had learned. Ghost, the star of the show, performed flawlessly, allowing Wes to ride him around the corral and even responding to some basic dressage commands. Mrs. Thornton watched with growing interest. "Extraordinary," she murmured, "especially that gray. You've preserved his spirit while earning his cooperation. That's no small feat." "It's all Wes," Delilah said proudly. "He has a gift." "Indeed he does." Mrs. Thornton turned to Harlan, who had joined them midway through the demonstration. "How much are you asking for all 5? Harlan named a figure that made Delilah's eyes widen, nearly twice what they needed for the bank. To her surprise, Mrs. Thornton didn't balk. "They're a fair price for exceptional animals," she said, "but I'm only interested in the grey and perhaps 1 or 2 of the others, not all 5. Delilah's heart sank. They needed to sell all 5 to meet the bank's deadline. However, Mrs. Thornton continued, "I might be persuaded to take them all on one condition." She looked directly at Wes. "That Mr. Calder comes to my ranch in Austin for at least 6 months to continue their training and to work with some of my other horses. His methods are exactly what I've been looking for." Wes looked stunned. "That's very generous, ma'am, but I'll pay you twice what Harlan's giving you," Mrs. Thornton added, "plus housing on my property." The offer hung in the air, a solution to their financial problems, but one that would take Wes away from Crescent. Ridge away from Delilah. Their eyes met, a silent communication passing between them. "I need a moment to consider," Wes said to Mrs. Thornton, who nodded understandingly. As Wes walked a short distance away, Harlan leaned close to Delilah. "This could save the ranch," he said in a low voice. "We'd have enough to pay off the bank and still have capital for your breeding program. We could start over." "I know," Delilah said, watching Wes's retreating figure. "But at what cost?" "Austin isn't the end of the world," Harlan pointed out. "It's a few hours' drive. If he truly cares for you, that won't be an obstacle." Delilah wasn't so sure. Wes had spent his life moving from place to place, never settling. Would a relationship with her be enough to make him want to return once the 6 months were up? Or would the road call to him again? Wes came back, his expression resolved. "I'll do it," he told Mrs. Thornton, "on one condition of my own. And that is that Delilah Carter has visiting rights to the Mustangs anytime she wants." "They're as much hers as anyone's," Mrs. Thornton smiled. "Of course, in fact, I insist. These horses clearly respond to both of you. It would be a shame to break up such a successful partnership." That evening, after Mrs. Thornton had gone back to Austin with the promise to return in a week with the paperwork and payment, Delilah found Wes at the creek meadow. He was sitting under the ancient oak tree, looking up at the stars just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "So you're leaving," she said, sitting beside him. "For a while," he replied. "Not forever. 6 months is a long time. Not in the grand scheme of things." He turned to look at her, his eyes serious. "Not when compared to how long I want to spend with you." Delilah's heart skipped a beat. "What are you saying, Wes?" "I'm saying that I love you, Delilah Carter, that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. That 6 months, 6 years, or 6 decades, it doesn't matter. I'll always find my way back to you." The words, so simple and heartfelt, brought tears to her eyes. "How can you be so sure? You've never stayed in one place with one person for long." "Because you're not just any person," Wes said softly. "And Crescent Ridge isn't just any place. You both got under my skin, into my heart. The thought of leaving tears me apart, but the thought of never coming back, That's unimaginable. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small worn leather pouch. This was my grandmother's, he said, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring with a small turquoise stone. It's not fancy or expensive, but it's been passed down through generations of Calder women. I want you to have it, as a promise. Delilah stared at the ring, then at Wes, hardly daring to believe what was happening. A promise of what? That I'll come back. That wherever I go, my heart stays here with you. He took her hand. I'm not asking you to marry me. Not yet. That's a question for when I return, when I've proven to you and to your father that I can be the man you deserve. But I am asking you to believe in us, to wait, to trust. Trust. The word that had haunted their relationship from the beginning. Could she truly trust him to come back, to choose her, to choose a settled life at Crescent Ridge over the freedom of the open road? Looking into his eyes, Delilah found her answer. Yes, she said simply. I believe in us. As Wes slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, the last of her doubts melted away. This was right, this was true, this was worth waiting for. They sealed the promise with a kiss, tender and full of hope for the future. When they finally pulled apart, Wes rested his forehead against hers. 6 months, he whispered, and then I'm coming home. Home. The word had never sounded so sweet. A week later, Delilah stood with her father as Mrs. Thornton's transport trailer pulled away from Crescent Ridge, carrying the 5 Mustangs to their new home in Austin. Wes would follow in his own truck the next day. You're sure about this? Harlan asked, watching his daughter's face. Delilah fingered the silver ring on her hand. I'm sure. He'll be back. And if he's not? Then I'll have learned a valuable lesson, she said with a small smile. But he will be. That night, Delilah took Wes to her mother's meadow one last time. They spread a blanket under the old oak tree and lay side by side, looking up at the vast Texas sky. I have something to show you, Delilah said, pulling an envelope from her pocket. It's from my mother, a letter she left to be opened when I found someone special. Wes looked surprised. And you've never opened it before now? I've never had a reason to, she replied softly. She broke the seal and unfolded the letter, her mother's familiar handwriting bringing a lump to her throat. As she read silently, tears filled her eyes. What does it say? Wes asked gently. Delilah's voice trembled as she read aloud. My dearest Delilah, if you're reading this, it means you've found someone who sees the real you, not the Carter name, not the ranch heiress, but the girl who talks to horses and walks the fence line at sunset. Someone worthy of your fierce, loyal heart. I've left something for you both. The deed to this meadow, separate from the rest of Crescent Ridge. It's yours alone, not the ranch's, not your father's. I've made arrangements for it to pass directly to you and whoever you choose to build your life with. This land has been my sanctuary, my piece of heaven on earth. Now it's yours. Build something beautiful here, something true. Oh, my love, Mum. Silence fell between them as the meaning of the words sank in. She knew, Wes finally said, awe in his voice. Somehow, she knew someone like me would come along. Someone who understands that taming doesn't mean breaking, Delilah said, looking at him with love. Someone who knows how to be patient, how to earn trust rather than demand it. This land, Wes said, running his hand over the grass beside them, it's perfect for horses, for the kind of breeding program you've been dreaming of. For our future, Delilah corrected him. 6 months, Wes promised again, pulling her close. 6 months, and then we start building that future, together. As they lay under the stars, wrapped in each other's arms, Delilah felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Her mother had always been able to see what was coming, to prepare for it with quiet wisdom. She had left this gift, this safe harbor, knowing that someday Delilah would need it. Crescent Ridge would survive, thanks to Mrs. Thornton's purchase of the Mustangs. And when Wes returned, they would build something new on this meadow, a place that honored both their pasts while creating a shared future, a place where wild hearts could run free, even as they chose to stay. In the end, Delilah thought, That was what love was all about. Not taming or breaking the wild spirit, but creating a home where it could thrive. Not forcing trust, but earning it day by day, moment by moment. And as Wes's arms tightened around her, as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Delilah Carter knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning of their story. 6 months would pass in the blink of an eye, and then they would have forever.